Hi everybody! From felines with scars that look like they've just come back from war, to a dog rediscovered years after a hurricane, here are 8 pets that returned home after being lost. Number 8. Prince the Irish Terrier. We know that all dogs are good boys, but Prince the Irish Terrier was such a good boy that he followed his owner into war. This is probably the oldest cast of a dog reuniting with its owner on this list. Prince lived a peaceful life in Buttevant, Ireland, with his owner James Brown and his wife. But when James went off to World War I in September 1914, Prince was devastated. And after James left, his wife and Prince moved to Hammersmith district of London. However, around November, she was shocked to find that Prince was nowhere in sight. Experiencing intense dismay, she wrote to her husband on the front lines about Prince's disappearance. But, amazingly, Brown wasn't fazed by his wife's letter, because by the time it had arrived, Prince had already found Private Brown deep in the trenches of Armentières. He was keeping Brown and his battalion in good company. How exactly they found one another among the chaos remains something of a mystery. Some say that Brown spotted a pup that looked like Prince, but when he got closer, he saw that it was his actual dog. Others say that different members of his battalion saw Prince and notified Private Brown immediately. But regardless of what happened, Prince would have had to swim the English Channel to find his owner. We can't be sure of every detail in the story due to lax reporting standards at the time, but if entirely true, it represents a remarkable connection between man and animal. And now for number 7, but first be sure to share your best pet stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell for more stories like these. Number 7. Willow the cat. Willow the cat returned home 5 years after escaping, but that's not the most extraordinary thing about Willow's journey back home. The craziest thing is where she was found. Although Willow the cat comes from Colorado, they discovered her walking around the busy streets of Manhattan. That's over 1,000 miles away from home. Willow must have had a wild ride across the country. Willow lived in Boulder, Colorado with her parents Jamie and Chris Squires and their 3 children. When a few workers left their house's door open and Willow escaped, while they tried to look around for Willow, they were in dismay, hoping that she would come back herself. But after 5 long years of waiting, they just assumed that Willow must have been gone for good. Maybe she'd made a life for herself as a tiny mountain lion in the Rockies of Colorado. Who knows? But then, out of nowhere, Jamie and Chris got a call that Willow had been recovered in the fairway of New York City. How could Willow have travelled as far as the Big Apple? No one really knows for sure, but veterinarians were able to analyse her microchip and definitely confirm that it was indeed Willow. Willow and her family went on a victory tour to NYC to interview with The Today Show. Even Michael Bloomberg chimed in, saying that Willow must have wanted to use one of her 9 lives up in New York City. Number 6. Ope the horse. Ope the horse was returned to its rightful owner after 10 long years of waiting. Ope's story has tons of twists and turns, so let me get right into it. Ope was Michelle Poole's horse. When she needed back surgery, she got her dad to watch Ope instead of paying pricey fees for boarding. Her father kept Ope behind a wire fence, but then somebody came and cut the fence open, stealing Ope away from its family. A horse like Ope would likely go for $15,000 on the market. Even though Michelle immediately filed a report, there was no news for 10 years. However, eventually she got the call. They had found Ope under mysterious circumstances. They discovered Ope over 200 miles away from his home. He was initially found by a pastor who claimed to have found Ope just walking along the road, and luckily he just so happened to have a trailer in which to store him. Did this pastor then try to return Ope? Nope. Instead, he put an ad up on Craigslist to sell the horse. But then one woman recognised Ope's picture from the list of lost horses and contacted local authorities. Thankfully, Michelle got Ope back after all that time. Law enforcement investigated the pastor's home for evidence of thievery, but found nothing. However, the pastor's story is without a doubt curious, and it seems like something fishy must have been going on. Number 5. Sophie Tucker the cattle dog. Sophie Tucker is an Australian cattle dog that survived alone on an island for 5 months, only to be reunited with her owners. This just proves how resilient animals can be in the face of adversity. When Jane and Dave Griffith were sailing with their cattle dog Sophie Tucker off the shores of Queensland, Australia, they ran into some serious weather. While trying to keep the boat upright, they were horrified to see that Sophie Tucker had gone overboard. While Jane and Dave thought all was lost, Sophie Tucker was busy proving that she was one of the toughest dogs in the world. Once she went overboard, she swam around 5 kilometers in harsh weather to the nearby deserted St. Bees Island, where she fended for herself for 5 months. There are tons of wild goats on St. Bees Island, and Sophie Tucker was able to hunt them for the few months that she was away. After hearing news of a dog hunting goats on St. Bees, rangers came to the island, captured Sophie Tucker, and returned her to her family. Jane and Dave were stunned. Sophie Tucker had been an indoor dog her entire life, but was able to live all on her own. But cattle dogs are indeed quite strong, and Sophie Tucker was no weakling. Do you think your dog has what it takes to make it in the wild? Let me know below. Number 4. Manuela the tortoise. Manuela the tortoise survived inside a box for over 30 years. In a suburban home in Rio de Janeiro around 1982, the Almeida family couldn't locate their pet tortoise Manuela, and assumed that some builders at their house doing renovations had simply left the door open for Manuela to walk through. But then, over 30 years later, when Leandro Almeida was clearing storage space, he came to a shocking discovery. Manuela somehow was alive and had been locked away the entire time. Talking to Globo, he said, "I put the box on the pavement for the rubbishmen to collect, and a neighbour said, 'You're not throwing out the turtle as well, are you?' I looked and saw her. At that moment, I turned white. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. To be honest, I can't either. How could something like this have ever happened?" Experts say that Manuela likely survived by eating up tiny insects like termites and flies, and drank condensation to stay hydrated. Many turtles have been reported as surviving without food for around 2 to 3 years, but that's nothing on Manuela's timestamp of 30 years. So if you ever happen to have had a tortoise go missing, be careful when you're throwing out old boxes, because you might just find that your old pet is more resilient than you could have ever imagined. Number 3. Nigel the parrot. For years, Nigel the parrot lived with Darren Chick, a Brit. In fact, after living with him for so long, Nigel even developed a British accent when he talked. But this African grey parrot flew away from his home in Southern California in 2010, and for 4 years Darren thought that all hope was lost. But when someone found Nigel 4 years after his departure, veterinarians were able to return Nigel back to Darren. But surprisingly, Nigel now spoke a different accent. What happened on Nigel's voyage? As it turns out, Nigel had been living with another family, the Smiths, for that entire time. They bought him from a yard sale after he'd gone missing, and Nigel spent most of his time with Ruben Hernandez, a member of the Smith family and recent widower, who renamed Nigel to Morgan. Over the years that Nigel spent with Ruben, he developed his new accent. So when Nigel returned back home to Darren after years of being gone, he knew something was up based on the bird's new accent. Of course, this is an incredible story, so it was on primetime news where Ruben's granddaughter was watching. She reached out to Darren and explained to him what had happened while Nigel was away. This nearly brought a tear to Darren's eyes, and he returned Nigel back to the Smiths, recognising that his home was now with them. A touching end to an amazing story. Number 2. Giggle-Blizzard the cat. When any cat runs away, their owners are naturally devastated and hope to find them soon. Giggle-Blizzard was gone for 11 days after escaping during a playdate. Her owner, Tracy Stager, must have been worried. Giggle-Blizzard might be the best name of any pet on this list. Honestly, I'm thinking it might just be the best name for anything in general. But Giggle-Blizzard has a story that's far more charged than this light-hearted name would suggest. Tracy put out calls for Giggle-Blizzard on Craigslist, but to no avail. But, incredibly, Giggle-Blizzard returned on the evening of Thanksgiving. While trying to enjoy the holiday with friends and family, she heard some distinctive meowing from outside, and when she looked, she was amazed to discover that Giggle-Blizzard had returned home. However, with some substantial battle scars. In fact, Giggle-Blizzard had to pull himself indoors. Sadly, both of her cat's hind legs were broken. They had been crushed by a car. This means that Giggle-Blizzard must have had rough travels on her way back home. But she made it nonetheless. I think that definitely counts as one of her 9 lives. And thankfully, a local veterinarian was able to perform some amazing surgery, and Giggle-Blizzard is now back in business. Take a look at these pictures of Tracy's cat in recovery. Pretty incredible that Giggle-Blizzard was able to make it back home safe, even if there were some huge physical challenges along the way. Number 1. Reckless the dog. Even though they thought he was long gone, Reckless the dog had made it through a big storm and was reunited with his family after a year and a half. How does something like this happen? Well, in 2012, Hurricane Sandy ravaged the New Jersey coastline, leaving immense wreckage in its wake. Sadly, Chuck and Alicia James experienced the brunt of Sandy's trajectory, and their house experienced significant damage. It also broke their fence, and their terrier pit bull mix, Reckless, went running. Chuck and Alicia were devastated, and they wanted more than anything to find Reckless. But after a year and a half, all of their prospects seemed hopeless. So when their daughter turned 10 years old, they decided it was about time to find another pup for her. So they went to their local Monmouth County SPCA. When they went there, however, they met a dog named Lucas, who looked an awful lot like Reckless. When Lucas saw the couple, he started jumping in the air. That's when they knew that this was Reckless after all. And they confirmed the fact based on a distinctive scar on his head. So, even after all this time and through one of the worst storms on record, Reckless was able to reunite with his family. I would say that's a much better birthday present. Not a new dog, but not having to say goodbye to an old one. Thanks again for watching. Do you have any stories of pets finding their way back home? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like this video and click that notification bell to stay up to date on all our coolest new videos. See you next time.